CloudBolt software, we fall into the category of a cloud management platform. And our goal is to really go out and to help our customers, the enterprises, the different agencies that we're working with, to go out and correctly adopt a hybrid cloud model, but also in a multi-tool world, because we're not just adopting AWS, Azure, and Google, we're adopting other systems like Terraform with infrastructure as code, or Cloud Formations, Chef, Puppet, Ansible, a lot of downstream systems that are playing in this hybrid cloud state. So regardless of the size of the organization that we talk to, the vertical that they're in, if they're civilian, DoD, Fortune 500, or small business, we encounter everybody on different steps or different phases of their digital transformation strategy. From not planning to looking at solutions to try to figure out how do you get out to the cloud, to people that are executing to figure out how do we correctly adopt cloud, because it's becoming a little bit more expensive than we initially anticipated. Because regardless of where you are, that end state you're going to end on is most likely it's going to be a hybrid cloud environment that you are going to be running in your environment. And when adopting hybrid cloud, you cannot compromise configurations of workloads, you cannot compromise security, and you need to ensure that you have guardrails in place to control cost. Because otherwise there are challenges, the most common challenges we see when talking with our customers and different enterprises and research groups, it's nearly 1/3 of security attacks are going to be on shadow IT workloads, or workloads that aren't managed by IT, or IT doesn't even know exist because somebody in the development group went and spun up their own AWS environment or account and are spinning up their own workloads. That user, he's not AWS certified, so he or she may have incorrectly configured that workload, leaving it open, leaving it vulnerable for a security attack. If IT was managing it, brokering it, you could prevent that. And that's the solution that CloudBolt can help solve. Nearly a majority of custom code projects that are out there in IT and cloud operations, they set out with one budget, and we're oftentimes finding they're 2 or 3 times over budget from the original estimate, from a time but also a cost standpoint. There's a lot of custom code that is out there and adopting these technologies because every cloud has their own way and processes of doing things. You have to worry about misconfigurations of workloads. So at the same time as you have that user spinning up their own AWS account, if they're not AWS certified, they might misconfigure it, and that could leave you open to that security attack. Or they could configure it where it's too large, and you can see there's nearly $14 billion in wasted spend every year from workloads that don't need to be running at all, that IT wasn't managing, or that could have afforded to be right-sized or just deprovisioned automatically. So these challenges are really being driven by the evolving landscape of IT, where it's going into that hybrid cloud environment. And you just saw how it's affecting security and governance, because the hybrid cloud, these hybrid cloud technologies, they're bringing in new power and capabilities, but it's creating those new challenges. And that's just flat out because there's complexity that is out there. There are multiple tools, from virtualization to public cloud. You have containers, infrastructure as code with Terraform, configuration management, Chef, Puppet, and Ansible. So the amount of technologies that are out there, the list isn't getting smaller. It's only getting larger. And you need a way to go out and leverage the power of all of these technologies correctly without compromising security or cost in your environment. So that's where a cloud management platform really comes into play. And there are some critical capabilities that a cloud management platform sets out to offer around orchestrating all of the downstream systems from provisioning of a workload. So provisioning an EC2 instance, but also running a vulnerability scan, or tying into your IPAM solution, or taking a backup of that system, or there's ever number amount of steps that can be taken when provisioning of the different workloads that are out there. Making sure it's optimized, used correctly. You don't want over or underutilized workloads, so using a cloud management platform like CloudBolt to help ensure everything is running at the correct scope. You have to report on everything that's out there in the environment. So now by the cloud management platform turning internal IT into the broker of workloads, you're able to report across all of the different technologies you are using, how much does it cost, where is it deployed, why is it deployed, who is it deployed by. So you have clear visibility across AWS, Azure, Google, VMware on all of this information. So these are just some of the kind of 8 different pins that CloudBolt sets out to deliver in our solution. And we've partnered with ViON to go out and deliver this to different enterprise and federal customers to help them on their digital transformation strategy and the correct adoption of a hybrid cloud environment. So I'd like to turn it over to Ray, our next presenter, to talk a little bit more about ViON and the solution that we've put together. So Ray, if you are ready, I can drive the slides for you, and but I will pass the presenter to you.
Sure. Yeah, we'll check out. You would drive the slide for me and bring that slide up. I'll just introduce you to ViON a little bit. I've been around 40 years delivering enterprise class IT solutions to customers. Nearly 20 years ago, we began focusing on what we'll call a private cloud solution model, really before cloud was recognized as a term. Today, we have over 25 contracts in the federal space in cloud business and over $1.1 billion in contracts being managed. And we do focus on federal SLED commercial customers as well. As a cloud service provider, we represent probably one of the largest portfolios of OEMs with over 50 vendors that we can take and turn into a private cloud deployment model. But as Colin already mentioned, we're talking about a multi-cloud or hybrid cloud world out there. We also partner with over a dozen public cloud providers so we can create the right cloud environment for our customers, give them the best optimal outcome. We have 50 OEMs, a dozen public cloud partners. We use one cloud services platform, the platform by CloudBolt. With this one platform, we're able to do end-to-end governance. We're able to do self-provisioning, self-management, all the things that are required really to achieve the results that folks are looking for when they go to a cloud. Back in the day, customers were looking at doing one cloud, they thought, and one cloud tool set, one set of expertise, if you will. And now when you're talking about extending cloud management to traditional infrastructure, we're talking about managing a dozen different public cloud providers. The last thing you want is to have 12 different tool sets, 12 different sets of expertise. It makes it very complicated. It makes achieving your results really, quite frankly, impossible. So it's really critical and important that we get down to a single cloud services platform to be able to manage the entire multi-cloud hybrid cloud environment. Go to the next slide. We'll talk a little more here about how CloudBolt helps ViON deliver on this vision. Again, with $1.1 billion of contract value being managed, what we were looking for when we went to the market and we researched many different tools was a single tool set that would allow us to do streamlined multi-cloud management. And we have found that with CloudBolt. We can interface with any public cloud, manage any public cloud that allows external automation, because there are still a few out there that don't, by using the CloudBolt tool. One key, as Colin has pointed out, is the security aspect of this. When we create infrastructure templates or patterns, we do that with the security built in, with the compliance built in for the agency, the organization, so that when those blueprints are deployed, when the infrastructure is spun up, it's spun up with security built in. We don't leave that to chance. And that's, again, very important in this world of cybersecurity attacks. Obviously, we want to accelerate the ability to provision workloads, and that's what this self-service service catalog allows us to do. You build the right patterns, you spin up the resources very quickly. And by the way, you can also spin them down at preset timeframes so that you don't have that wasted cost for infrastructure that's still being charged for, but in fact, it's not being used. With the CloudBolt capability, we're able to see all the consumption that is going on. We're able to see and understand the performance of the workloads. And again, we use that to make sure we're meeting the service level agreements and the objectives that our customers have in mind. We can tailor these infrastructure patterns, again, for best case solutions, best in breed solutions that we give optimum performance to our customers, optimum availability. All that, again, built into the service catalog that we create using the CloudBolt capability. And then finally, continuous monitoring for compliance, of course, with FedRAMP. continuous monitoring is a critical aspect of being FedRAMP compliant, but even for private infrastructure, our customers will want to know if their security is intact, if the patterns and infrastructure that's being used are compliant. And ViON has partnered with CloudBolt to be able to kick off our own continuous monitoring capability to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our customers. So again, if you just take a step back, we've made this change now as a world. Now we're into a multi-cloud, hybrid cloud environment. And gone are the days that we can afford to use multiple tool sets to be able to achieve results. We have to focus on one tool set that's able to get us what we need across every cloud where we've deployed resources. And that's what ViON finds CloudBolt to be extremely effective in helping us do that. Back over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Ray. And you bring up a lot of good points throughout all of this. I mean, you're hitting on the point. We need to bring simplicity to the ever-growing complexity of this hybrid cloud world and hybrid cloud journey. You talk about, I spoke about during my piece, that you cannot jeopardize security for cloud adoption. So that's going to be a core point to delivering the CMP and your hybrid cloud journey. So with that, I want to pass it over to our next and really final presenter, Rod, he's gonna take you through a live demonstration of the platform. And Rod, I'll let you give yourself a quick introduction. I'll stop sharing my screen so you can take presenter. But really wanted to, you'll see in Rod's demonstration that that ability to deliver simplicity, deliver control, turn internal IT into the broker, where you now have secure access to the different cloud environments. So Rod, with that, I will pass it over to you.
Thanks, Colin. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rod Musser. I'm a product manager at CloudBolt, and today I just want to kind of demonstrate some of the things that Colin and Ray were talking about earlier. Just to confirm, Colin, can you confirm that you can see CloudBolt up on the screen?
Yes, I can.
Thank you very much. All right. So I'm just going to walk through a really simple scenario of where a user needs to order in a web server. They need an Apache instance running. Fairly simple example, but I want to show how CloudBolt can do that in such a way so that that user gets allocated the right amount of resources, but no more, both from utilization and a cost perspective, and it's configured correctly and securely, and can operate in a multi-cloud environment in such a way that is transparent to the end user. I'm logged in as a CloudBolt administrator, but this is something that a CloudBolt user would see. This is the service catalog that Ray was talking about. I just have a few things available here in my service catalog. CloudBolt, of course, comes with a lot more out of the box. And of course, with our partnership with ViON, we have many more built and available. I'm going to go and order, for the demo here, I'm just going to order this service catalog item about ordering Apache on Linux. So this is what the user is going to experience when they need to order that. All right, so here I've got a choice to make in terms of the environment that I want to deploy in. Before I jump into that though, I can see a very quick and dirty cost preview based on some assumptions of where I'm deploying this and how much it would cost on a monthly basis. But here I've got two selections, and basically I'm being asked, do I want to be deployed? Do I want to deploy this into a development environment? Do I need a web server for development purposes, or do I need something for production? And then based on that choice, I'm going to be asked maybe some different sets of information. So from a, if I'm deploying into a development environment, you can see it's asking me to give the server a host name, to pick the operating system I want to deploy it on. In this particular case, I've only got it configured to deploy in RHEL. And then to set an expiration date of the server. When can this server expire? So a very common scenario of in a development environment, I want to limit, I don't want resources to live around forever. So I'm going to go ahead and set that. You can see that the cost information here, if that's of interest, gets updated dynamically. And that's all the information I need to provide to deploy a server and to install Apache on it. Notice it's not asking me for CPU, memory, or any sort of that resources. All of that has been pre-configured, and I'll show how we do that later in the demo. Basically, it's asking the user, making the process as simple as for them as possible. Notice that we don't even really know where this is being deployed. It could be in a private cloud, it could be in a public cloud. Again, if that information is not relevant to the user ordering it, we can make that as transparent as you want it to be. If I were to pick deploying into production, you can see the choices are a little bit different. It's a production server, so we don't really have an expiration date. We want to leave it up and running. Here I have a little more options around how many CPUs, depending on maybe the power that I need for this particular web application. Here I can choose a memory size, how much memory gets deployed on this server, but I'm still limited within certain constraints. I can allocate up to the 2 gigs. Again, entering a host name. And here, since it's a production system, we want to take advantage of data protection. And so CloudBolt here is helping you deploy a server and configure it on Rubrik, which is a data protection solution, to make sure that when this server is deployed, it's being backed up and snapshotted properly according to policy. So really, this is the end goal. This is what all the configuration in CloudBolt is helping you to achieve, to be able to deploy a server in a compliant way or deploy a resource in a compliant way, giving users the flexibility that they need, but when they don't need to make those choices, not have them have to make them, right? So as we go through this, I'm going to actually pick a development environment. I'm going to deploy something in the background here as we take through how we set this up. Let's say I want to keep this around for a month. If I submit this order, it's going to tell me, oh, you know, for this environment, we're only going to let servers live for 14 days. Great. I'll go back. Let's put it a week out here, and I'll submit that order. All right. So at this point, it's going to go off and provision that server. And while it's doing that, I want to go through some very basic concepts inside of CloudBolt to describe how we configured and set that up. And so I'm going to be talking about groups, environments, and resource handlers. And at a high level, groups relate users of CloudBolt and their permissions to environments. And environments kind of abstract out and govern how cloud services are used. And environments are associated to resource handlers. And resource handlers is that actual thing that actually ties directly to a public or a private cloud environment, right? So it's a resource handler that's going to connect to AWS, or the resource handler that connects to VMware. So to kind of go into the example that I demoed there, that user was a member of the sales engineering group. And so let's say that for this group, when they're doing stuff in development, they want to use AWS because of its flexibility. The development demands tend to be elastic, so AWS is a good fit for this organization. But then let's say for cost reasons, they want to deploy into vCenter in their private data center. And so when you're setting up groups inside of CloudBolt, the first thing you want to think of is, you know, how you want to organize governance in your organization. And so here in the groups, this is sort of the first area that you can see where we can provide some level of cost visibility and cost control. So you'll see here, I can go and see all the services that this group has deployed. This could be across multiple different cloud environments. And so we can see that I've got 5 servers deployed. They're costing me $51 a month. You can see that the CPU count, memory size, and disk size. Furthermore, I can set limits at the group level and say, hey, you know, I want to limit on a server basis. I want to limit on a cost basis, CPU, memory, disk, any combinations of those you can set quotas on. And then when those quotas are exceeded, it's configurable what action you want to take. You can prevent users from deploying more resources into that group. You can notify an administrator that the quota has been exceeded. There's different configurations you can use to deploy or to control what gets deployed into this group. At a high level, you can see at a group level, you can establish an approval process. This one I've got just set to auto approval, so everything just runs automatically. But you could assign users or other groups inside of CloudBolt to be approvers of orders. And you can even extend that capability so that to implement some workflows around if the cost of a server is below a certain threshold, go ahead and auto approve it. And if it's higher than a certain threshold, go ahead and send it to somebody for approval before provisioning. You can also see here that groups organize users. So here I am an admin for this group, so I have full permissions to it. You can see that we've got a couple different users. They have the requester role, right? They can order things and provision it, order things from the service catalog and provision it to the group. So going back to quotas really quick, you can see here that we've got 5 servers deployed in this group. So where are those servers actually deployed? Where are they running? And the answer to that question is that they're deployed in environments. So if we go and look at, so we've got 2 environments associated with this group, the development and production. If we go into the development environments, we can take a look here, and at a high level, we can see, okay, this development environment is attached to an AWS resource handler. So this environment is sort of abstracting out all the capabilities of AWS to all the catalog services that you can deploy inside of CloudBolt. If we were to go to the other group and look at production, we can see that our production is attached to a vCenter resource handler. So things being provisioned inside this environment are being deployed inside of vCenter. So if we go back to that AWS, and you can see that environments can belong to multiple groups here. So multiple groups can share environments. So let's go back. Actually, we'll go. All right, so we're back in this environment that is pointed to an AWS instance. Now, we saw when I was ordering that Apache server, I was, because I'm deploying in this environment, I'm deploying it into AWS. Notice it didn't ask me like what AWS instance size did I want, what EBS volume, what kind of disk volume do I want to use? It didn't ask me any of those questions. And the way that as an administrator, you can control what users either can or can't select, or what choices a user can select in CloudBolt is done through something called parameters. So if you remember, we had that expiration date parameter on the order form. Here's where that's configured. And you'll see here that I have it constrained to a max of 14 days. So this is one way that CloudBolt can sort of establish and make sure that proper cost policies and cost control practices are being followed. Users deploying servers in this environment are not going to be able to deploy a server that's going to live longer than 14 days. And then for each environment, depending on the type of resource handler it's pointed to, you're going to have these kind of tech-specific parameters. So you can see here, let's take instance type, for example. I'm going to re-import the selection of instance types. So what I've done here is I said, hey, AWS, give me all the instance types that I could possibly deploy to. It's obviously a large list. Now, maybe for user, this is a development environment, right? There's no need for a developer to deploy some super heavy, super expensive, super large instance type with huge GPU on it, lest they go out and instantiate it and start mining Bitcoin or something like that. As an administrator, you want to be able to control, both from a cost and resource perspective, what kind of server, what kind of instance types they want to deploy in this environment. So what I can do as an administrator say, you know what, hey, I want to limit it to the relatively small T2 instances. So they can do, by making this selection, I'm saying anybody who deploys a server from this environment, they're only going to be able to deploy one of these instance types. If you look at EBS volume type, here are all the defaults, or here are all the ones available from AWS. Let's just say for a development environment, you know what, we don't even want them to be able to choose which volume type. They can just select a general purpose EBS volume type should be sufficient. So we're not even going to give them that selection. We're just going to make that for them. So this gives you an idea how through parameters you can control what the user can provision. Other choices you have here are OS builds. So what types of in this case, since it's an AWS environment, what kind of AMIs can you deploy? So this way, if you've got a set of purpose-built AMIs, you know, with the latest security updates, AMIs that are configured in according to a security policy or according to a security configuration, you can make sure that those are the only AMIs that users can deploy from CloudBolt. And that's where you would configure that here. And then you map those to, or CloudBolt automatically will map them to OS type. So it'll recognize that a particular instance type would be a CentOS or a Linux or a Red Hat. And if CloudBolt can't figure it out, you can set that manually as well, or you can override what CloudBolt's selection was. Another way of being able to control from a security and configuration perspective is what subnets in the VPC that users are able to deploy to. Also, I didn't talk about it in the AWS parameters, but you notice here that I have chosen everything has to be deployed with this security group called nothing open, right? So if I've got a particular policy around what ports I want available inbound and outbound on a particular server, I can determine I can set the security group and not give users a choice around that. So, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to deploy one other thing. Sorry about that. You can see here at an environment level, we can set limits and have visibility into, hey, how many servers or what's my development environment costing me? So I have that visibility here. So remember that in CloudBolt, multiple groups can have access to an environment. So you can see it from a group level, but you can also see maybe all your development groups in your organization are pointing to this environment. You can see what your development environment costs are here and set quotas and limits around that as well. I'm going to deploy a server into AWS in just a second to kind of show you how, when we make these selections, how that controls what the user can and can't do. But before I do that, really quickly, I want to go and let's take a look at how the vCenter resource handler is similar and different. Again, you have general parameters that can apply to any cloud environment. So you notice here that data protection plan I have configured here in terms of what protection plans the user can select from. That's where the selection on that Apache order form that I did earlier, this is where it got generated from. Here's where the mem size, I constrained the memory size to 2 gigs or between 1 and 2 gigs. So very similar to the AWS resource handler, you can set those parameters here. Notice I don't have the expiration date parameter here because it's a production environment. I don't want to set expiration dates on production environment servers. Now, similar to AWS, there's some very specific parameters to vCenter. So in this case, what data store does the VM use? What disk provisioning type do we want to set up? What resource pool do we want to use? And just like with AWS, I can say, well, you know what? I want everything in this environment to be deployed onto the tin tree or use the tin tree data store. All right. And then again, same thing with networks. I can choose what VMware networks I want to be able to deploy servers onto. And the same idea with OS builds, but instead of AMIs, we're pulling images that are available inside of the vCenter resource handler that we're using. And again, you can see the usage in this environment and see how many resources this production environment is using. Okay, so to give you an idea of how these parameters affect what a user can do, I'm going to do a very simple use case of just ordering a new server into that development environment, into AWS. So I'm going to select my group. We were talking about the sales engineering group. I'm going to select my environment, development environment. So based on that, notice that I get all these selections. I can choose the OS build if I want to do an Amazon AMI, a Red Hat. I can choose which subnet I want to deploy on. Remember, we left all 4 available. If we go to instance type here, notice that it's limited to the instance types that I specified in the environment. Notice that I don't have an ability to choose the disk volume type, the EBS volume type that I want to use. That's because there was only one choice available, the GP2. There's no need to display it to the user. They don't need to select anything. And then again, setting the expiration date. So this gives you an idea of how we can use parameters and configuration in those environments inside of CloudBolt to control what the users can and can't do. It puts guardrails around it, and it's totally customizable and flexible depending on your users' needs. Maybe users do need really fine-grained control of various parameters in setting up a server, and maybe others don't. And you have complete control over how that experience works. All right, now, remember that Apache server that we deployed from the service catalog was getting deployed into this environment, the development ENG environment. But I didn't have to select, I did have to select expiration date, I did have to enter a host name, but I didn't have to select a NIC, I didn't have to select an instance type. How come I didn't have to do that? Because on a catalog item, you can configure that catalog item to even further customize and restrict the choices that the user has. So if I go back into that Apache on Linux blueprint, we're looking at what a administrator of the blueprint would see. And if we go into the build, one side note, so blueprints inside of CloudBolt just aren't about building resources, right? There's also capabilities around discovery. So if I wanted to have the capability to discover existing resources in the environment, I can do that. I can create management tasks so that if once the server is deployed, if I wanted to be able to restart Apache or to reload the Apache config file from CloudBolt, I could configure that inside of the blueprint. And then, as Ray mentioned in the presentation, it's not just about standing up services, it's about tearing down services. We can define like what needs to happen in a tear down of a particular resource. So it's really about, blueprints are not just about building resources, but it's all about the complete life cycle of a resource. All right, so back, how did I narrow down further what the user had control over selecting parameters for when they were deploying into environment? And the way we do that here is through these configured environments. So here's that development environment. You'll notice here that I can predefine the selections that are available in that environment so that when you order the blueprint, the user doesn't have to select them or can't select them, depending on your point of view. So here I'm saying, you know, I'm predefining, I want all of these Apache servers to be deployed on this subnet. I want all of the Apache servers to be deployed on a T2 micro. It's a development environment. They don't need powerful boxes, and I want to minimize my AWS costs. So I can predefine that. I want to predefine what the key pair is used to access that server. So it's taking away unnecessary choices away from the user, and both from a policy and from a security perspective, right? Prevention is the best strategy, right? If you can make sure that servers are deployed in a certain configuration, you're going to prevent a lot of downstream issues. And this is a way that you can do that inside of CloudBolt. If we go back, we can take a look at, we can go ahead and take a look at the, our order. So in CloudBolt, when you do order something, we show exactly all the steps that happened. You know, in this case, everything deployed wonderfully. It provisioned a new server. We have the basic server information here, and it installed Apache. And we can go in and actually take a look at the server and see various details about it. You can see the server actions. You can take here, excuse me, you can see the disk size, the networks, et cetera, and be able to do basically day 2 management of this going forward. A couple other things I want to point out. Brownfield discovery. So, you know, Colin talked about shadow IT. You can't manage, you can't cost control, you can't secure what you don't know is out there, right? So discovery is key. One of the basic capabilities of a resource handler, remember, that's the thing that basically connects CloudBolt to a private or public cloud. Let's open up an AWS resource handler. But this feature is available on most resource handlers where you can sync the existing servers that you have out in your AWS environment. If this was vCenter, it would sync and pull all the existing vCenter servers that are out there. And this way you can get a good understanding of how much do you have deployed in AWS, right? Not everyone is maybe going through CloudBolt to provision things. You're gonna be able to catch people coming in through the back door this way and seeing what they're provisioning and actually getting control of costs. And to that point, you know, of course, CloudBolt provides a variety of reports around cost, server utilization, to give you a overall view of what's going on. Here's a sample cost summary report for all groups. So first of all, I can take a look and see which group is costing me the most money, and it happens to be the ones that are unassigned. So when a server is initially discovered by CloudBolt, it gets put into this default unassigned group. And so this gives you visibility that, my shadow IT is costing me some real money here. Maybe I want to start investigating and figuring out where those instances are coming from. Why are they there? Are they really needed? But this will also give me an idea of, hey, what is your greatest cost? Is it your production environment? Is it your development environment? And it allows you to develop strategies and take action on that. One last thing before I wrap up is, part of compliance is not only, it's good that we can deploy things in certain configurations to ensure that they're compliant with policy and security, but also things change. Obviously, state changes. CloudBolt has what we call a rules engine, and this sort of points to how just a small aspect of how CloudBolt is incredibly extensible in your environment. And we have these things called rules. And what rules are, they're basically if-then statements. And what you can do is define a CloudBolt plugin. And so we'll see, here if we have this rule that says email owners of AWS if the VMs are missing a required tag. Maybe you, as policy, you have a tag that tags the group or tags a cost code or some other kind of policy that all VMs deployed in AWS need to be categorized and tagged. If CloudBolt detects a VM that doesn't have that tag, we can take an action on it. Now, basically, the conditional statement here is, okay, how do we figure out if a VM is missing a tag? So this one, this particular one, we provide out of the box. But what it's doing is executing a plugin, and a plugin is essentially a Python script where we will pass in sort of the running state of the system, and you can access that state, and then examine that state and determine if, in this case, if that if condition is true or false. So we have a lot of customers who will write their own plugins, and they can utilize them here in rules. They can utilize them throughout a variety of orchestration hooks that we provide in the application. So let's say you have some standard activities that you occur on the post-provisioning of a server, for example. We've got a hook, so you can say, hey, when a server is provisioned, run this plugin, or you can run an automated script, or you can call an API. These orchestration hooks really allow deep customization capabilities so that CloudBolt can implement your desired lifecycle activities for your resources. But at the end of the day, these rules can be run on a schedule. CloudBolt, basically you define a cron schedule and CloudBolt executes that. So you can run that once a week, once a day, once an hour, once every 5 minutes, however long you want to be able to check for these conditions and run them. So that really helps you monitor the configuration of your servers. And if something goes out of whack, you can take, something goes out of compliance, I'll use a more technical term than out of whack. It'll go out of compliance. CloudBolt can detect that and take action on that. And so that wraps up my, my demo.